Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Justice, and today I am going to be doing a tier list for the top 50 horror franchises. I made a couple rules in this list of movies I have on here. I had to seen the vast majority of the films in the franchise. In fact, I really only put franchises where I've seen every entry or I've missed only one, because I don't really think it's fair to be able to rank a horror franchise based off of only seeing half the movies in it, because then you don't know the broader picture of it. There's only like one exception I think I have to that on this list, but when it comes up, I feel like you guys are going to understand entirely. But also, there's going to be horror franchises on here that are fairly basic, but I am not going to have on this said list because, again, I haven't seen all of them quite yet, but eventually, in due time, I'm going to imagine that they will end up on here. But I have this list broken up into 5 different categories. The bottom category is Get Out. That means that all the movies in this franchise are pretty much garbage. There might be 1 or 2 exceptions to that rule, but overall, if I ever had to marathon these movies, then I am not going to be very impressed with you whatsoever. And then the next category we have is The Purge, and this is for those franchises that have some good sequels, but if I could, I would purge most of those movies out of this franchise, and I just don't want half of it there. And again, I'm not going to want to be doing an entire viewing of the entire series. And then next up, we have the category, and I feel like is kind of self-explanatory, where like, yeah, it's pretty decent. There's a good chunk of good movies in there. There's a few lackluster stinkers in there, but overall, like, it's a good time enough, I guess. And then for the next one, we have The Dream Child. This is for the movies that get like an overall like A for their franchise. Like, for the most part, I can get down with most of it, and like, I have a good enough time with it. There may be a couple of ones in there that teeter away from being in the top category, but they're still pretty solid franchises overall. And then, of course, in our number 1 slot, and there's going to be very few movies in this selection, is going to be The Perfection. And this is where, overall, I love your franchise. I think all the sequels are good, or at least for the most part, all of them are good. And that, like, maybe, yes, there's a couple that are a little lackluster overall, but for me, I love it. And then, before we get into this list of movies, I also want to preface that this is all my opinion at the end of the day, and you guys are fully welcome to disagree with me in the comments down below, but this is just all based off of my own personal enjoyment of these movies. But without further ado, we're just going to go off section by section. They're not ranked within the sections for what they are, because that would take way too much time to do, and I am not doing that here today. But to start out with the Get Out section, first up on that list, we are going to be talking about the Urban Legend trilogy. The Urban Legend films are very much that era of horror where everything was trying to be like Scream, and the first Urban Legends, though it's not a great movie, it's still a fun movie. I mean, we have Rebecca Gayheart in it as the villain, and again, like, she's a fairly iconic character. I love her. I think a few of the kills in that the first one, are really good. But then you have Urban Legends: The Final Cut, and that movie's so goddamn fucking boring, and it's such a by-the-numbers slasher sequel. And then by the time you get to Urban Legends: Bloody Mary, it's just straight-to-video garbage. Like, there's not much else I can say about it. So that's why it ends up on the list. One solid movie doesn't make up for the other 2 movies being just not a good time to watch. And then next up in the Get Out section is going to be the Human Centipede trilogy. And I have only seen the first 2 Human Centipedes. And just like with Urban Legends, I will defend the first Human Centipede. I think the first Human Centipede is actually a very good movie. I don't care what anybody says. I have a good time with it, at least. The second one, though, it was so fucking gross. And even Tom Six, the creator of it, was very honest that he had gotten so much like pushback for all the things that he did in the first Human Centipede when he hadn't really been that gross. So essentially he was like, hold my beer, I'm gonna show you what's gross. And he did, and it worked. And it killed me on ever wanting to watch any more sequels in this franchise. Like, yes, I know there's only one more that I haven't seen, but that second one just grossed me out so much. And not even like the fun kind of like schlocky gross like other things you're gonna eventually see on this list. This just felt really just nasty to watch. So he accomplished what he did. I didn't like it, but he accomplished it. But for that, I can't rank it any higher because I don't have any personal need to want to watch any future entries in this franchise, and I don't also feel the need to rewatch anything past that first movie because gross. Just gross. But hey, at least because of Human Centipede, we got that really good viral song on YouTube. So we can say some thanks, I guess.
She said the best movie of all, a masterpiece of art. Human Centipede, Human Centipede.
Next up for the Scream clones is actually also in the Screw That list, and that is going to be I Know What You Did Last Summer. This franchise has over 5 entries. We have 4 films, and we have the TV show, and I only like 2 entries in this franchise. I think the first I Know What You Did Last Summer is really fun, 90s vibes. I think the first I Know What You Did Last Summer is an admittedly iconic horror film. I love the use of Sarah Michelle Gellar in this movie. She is the true final girl of that film and didn't deserve to die. I will not say anything else other than that. The second one is admittedly kind of a dumb schlocky slasher, but it's really fun. The third one, though, is just straight to video garbage that was just trying to make money off of the name of I Know What You Did Last Summer. The TV series, again, it was straight to streaming garbage. It lacked any actual heart to it whatsoever. And I think a big part of the reason that TV series even got greenlit was because of the fact that the Scream TV series was going on around that time. And I actually enjoyed the Scream TV show with all of its flaws. This, I did not feel the same way. It just felt really boring and generic overall. And then, of course, we have our most recent entry in the franchise with the I Know What You Did Last Summer reboot or requel or whatever the hell it is. And that movie just shit the bed so fucking hard because the first half of the I Know What You Did Last Summer movie is so freaking good, and then it's that whole second half that completely decided to waste any potential that it had. I wouldn't even have minded the killer reveal in that film, but my god, you could have done it without, like, just spoon-feeding. Not even spoon-feeding. At that point, you just had, like, a funnel and were, like, just choking your audience with it. And, like, the message of the movie you were going for, which, again, I don't think I Know What You Did Last Summer ever leaned that heavily into poking fun at horror tropes. So I think it's weird that they decided to try to do it in this entry. But overall, I cannot get down with this franchise. I don't really think we need any more sequels to it. Those first 2 films are good enough, but can we just leave it there? We don't need any more I Know What You Did Last Summer in our lives. Next up on the list is going to be the Leprechaun franchise, and I feel like this is kind of a cheap shot because Leprechaun is not a good franchise. It knows it's not a good franchise, but there's like 9 movies in this series, and I've seen them all for better or for worse, and especially when I was growing up, sci-fi marathons were a thing during St. Patrick's Day. They always showed these movies, so I've seen them all at some point or another. They're not good movies, though. Overall, I would say I don't mind the first 3 in the franchise. Again, they're not good movies. I would never sit here and try to convince you that they are, but everything that comes after those first 3, it's just kind of like, why am I watching this? Because once he goes to space, I'm just kind of over it. Like, I think the space entries in other franchises are admittedly fun, but here, I don't know, man. I just don't like that little bastard. That's all I know. Coming up next to talk about on this list is going to be the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And for those who don't know, yes, this is technically a franchise because there are 3 entries in it. We have the original Rocky Horror, we have a lesser known talked about sequel, Shock Treatment, and then we have the remake they did, Rocky Horror Picture Show, Let's Do the Time Warp Again. And out of all these films, the only one that I feel any love for is the original 70s film, and that's Tim Curry and having Susan Sarandon in the film. I think they both do fantastic jobs in this. I think the movie was so ahead of its time, but everything they did after with this franchise, which admittedly isn't much, there's only 3 movies on this list, but everything they did after this just pales in comparison because Shock Treatment is super forgettable. I've seen the movie before, but I can't even tell you what it's about or the first thing about it. And also the fact that hardly any actors returned for this film either, I feel like says a lot. And then by the time that you get to the remake, it lacks a lot of the heart that the original one had, which makes sense because it was a made-for-TV remake of the film, and it's cool seeing like these bigger singers and such playing these characters. Yes, they have good voices, like I would never be the one to say they don't, but you're just watching a copy-paste reprint of the original, and why not just watch the original at that point? I mean, are you gonna watch Psycho or are you gonna watch Psycho 98? I feel like it's the same argument that you have there, and I'm not a fan of this franchise. I think the first movie was good, and it's one of those ones where I don't think we need to do anything else with it in the future. If you want to see a new version, go see it like in a theater or a play or something, but we don't need to make a new screen adaptation of this film. And coming up next is going to be the Hatchet franchise, and I believe there's 4 or 5 entries in these movies, and I, honest to God, can't remember. I've seen every single one of them. It's been a while, but I've seen them. I don't really know why I watched through all of them either, because I didn't think it was that good. I know that you have your Hatchet defenders, but overall, I just felt like this franchise was very forgettable to me overall. I think that some of the practical effects are really cool and really fun in these movies, but there isn't much for me to latch on in the story department. I think it's really cool that we get a lot of horror alums that show up in this film, and I will admit I did have fun seeing actors like Danielle Harris becoming the main final girl in these movies. It was cool seeing Stretch from Texas Chainsaw 2 in these films, and then of course having Kane Hodder pop up I thought was really neat, but they don't really have any characters that I actually enjoy in these movies, and they all just pale in comparison to so many bigger, better franchises at the end of the day. And I'm not a big fan of Victor Crowley's design overall. I mean, you could just insert him into a Wrong Turn movie and you essentially have one of your mutant hillbillies of that film. Like, there's nothing really that original about it. So it's just not really my cup of tea at the end of the day. I get why people like it, so like I won't yuck your yums by any means, but I just don't feel the need to ever rewatch any of those movies, and they were very much a one and done kind of experience for me. But coming up next is another trilogy, or I guess 4 movies. I haven't seen the 4th one, but it is Cube. Cube is another one of those instances, very much like with I Know What You Did Last Summer or Urban Legends. Hell, I would probably even compare it more to Urban Legend, honestly, for my feelings about it, because the first Cube, I think, is a really good, like, sci-fi horror flick. I love this whole concept of, like all these people waking up inside this cube, and then they just go room to room, and it's just more cubes, but there's traps in them, and they have to figure out whether or not they're able to escape. I think that's all really fun. I actually enjoyed all that aspects of that film, and it just made it feel super claustrophobic as they were trying to figure out how to escape out of this like hellish escape room. Where they lost me is once you get to Cube 2, the effects are just extremely lackluster, and it has some of the worst CGI that I have seen in most horror flicks ever. It's just not that good of a movie. And then by the time you get to the third one, it's not as bad as that second one, but it also lacks a lot of the heart that the first one had and the charm of that movie. So it's just a forgettable sequel. And the one I haven't seen is the Korean remake they made for it a few years ago. Apparently, it's very much just a copy-paste remake of the original, so I didn't feel much need to rewatch it, because again, like, it's a Psycho situation. Why watch Psycho 98 when you could just watch the original Psycho? Like, I have Cube. Like, you don't need to just do a shot-for-shot remake of it. But I do think it's cool that they made the story for a different audience. I mean, they do that here in America sometimes. And I think it's neat when you see other cultures do it to our films. So at least we're not the only ones ripping off the entertainment industry at the end of the day, I guess. But coming up next, we have I Spit on Your Grave, and this franchise is a super icky and hard one to get through because at the end of the day, these are rape revenge movies, and they very much just delve into making you uncomfortable with all the assaults that the women that are in these films have to face. And I know in these films that, like, they have this awful assault happen, and then the woman, like, gains power eventually and, like, goes after the ones who hurt her. And there's some entries in this subgenre of horror that I do enjoy. Like, I'm a huge defender of the Last House on the Left remake. I actually really enjoyed that film. I just don't think these ones work as well. They're just too brutal for me, and I don't really like any of the characters because the characters only exist to be brutal and then to later on have brutal things done to them, which admittedly is enjoyable to see. Like, those guys get their just desserts in these movies, but also it's just a very miserable, like, watching experience overall, and I just can't really get behind it. I'm not a fan of it. There's over 5 movies, I believe, in this franchise. I've seen 4 of the 5 because I saw the original, and then I've seen the remake trilogy that they did in, like, the 2000s. And all of them I'm just kind of to. I think they're kind of icky and kind of gross at the end of the day. So that's why it ranks so low. There really isn't anything for me to be able to rewatch in this franchise. But coming up next is going to be the Hellraiser franchise, and there are over 11 movies in this franchise, and this is how you know this list is not biased by me, because Hellraiser 2 is one of my all-time favorite movies, yet this franchise is still at the bottom of this list, and that's because most of the straight-to-video shit is just absolute garbage. They literally would just take a script that was shelved and be like, we need to keep the rights to Pinhead, so let's just write him in here so that we have a few more years where we're good with him and we'll make a few bucks off this straight-to-video garbage and not have to do any work. Like, I just think they fumbled this character so much. He is such an iconic character in 80s horror, but he's also one of the most, like, laughable ones of 80s horror, because everything after Hellraiser 2 is extremely questionable, other than the Hulu remake they made a couple years ago now, which they did a really good job on that. And I am sad to say that I don't think we're probably going to see anything else to do with that movie because we haven't heard anything. So I feel like Hellraiser is going to continue being in, like, that weird limbo world where we're not going to really see much from that franchise still. But overall, even with as much as I love that second movie and I love the first movie, I just can't put this franchise any higher on the list, because if I did, I would have to say that I would enjoy binging all the movies in this franchise, and I would not be okay with binging all 11 of these fuckers because, my god, they're not good movies. Coming up next, though, is going to be Jeepers Creepers, and this franchise is just inherently kind of icky to talk about in the first place, especially with all the stuff that happened with Victor Salva. He's a really disgusting dude, and he should be kicked out of Hollywood. I don't think I need to be the one to say that, or any other person filming videos about Jeepers Creepers needs to be the one to say that. Hollywood just needs to not hire predators at the end of the day. It's that simple. But the first Jeepers Creepers is admittedly fun. The second one is a very stupid movie, but it has entertainment value. But by the time you get to the third Jeepers Creepers, you're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel as they're trying to drop more lore for the creeper, and it just does not work. And you would think that would be the worst film of this franchise, and they couldn't hit anything lower. You would be very, very sadly wrong, because, my God, Jeepers Creepers Reborn is hands down one of the worst sequels I have ever seen. If it wasn't for the fact that I am not a Jeepers Creepers purist, I would probably say that it's worse than Freddy's Dead, but I have a lot of love for the Nightmare franchise, so I cannot say that. So Freddy's Dead ultimately pisses me off more than Jeepers Creepers Reborn did, but Jeepers Creepers Reborn is such a fucking bad movie, and it was made during COVID, so there's a lot of, like, green screens and, like, actors showing up on green screens so that they can keep, like, their 6-foot distance. There's a lot of fucking moments where the makeup on the creeper just does not look good whatsoever. At least in Jeepers Creepers 3, the creeper still looked like the fucking creeper. By this entry, it just looks like a really cheap prosthetic, like, Halloween costume. I wouldn't even say prosthetic. It just looks like a fucking cheap mask that you could have picked up at Spirit Halloween. Ultimately, I think this movie probably killed the franchise. But then again, this is an IP, and it has selling power, so who's to say they're not going to schlop out some more garbage in a couple years, because they can. Like, we see it in so many horror franchises, so what makes Jeepers Creepers the exception? But I probably am not going to watch that next entry, especially if I see the trailer and it looks anywhere near as bad as 3 and 4. Like, we can just be done with Jeepers Creepers. Let's just say that we're done with it now, and we'll burn the rest with fire. Just pretend nothing exists after the first 2 movies. And coming up next too, and this is the one exception that I said I made to the rule that I made at the beginning of the video for only having missed 1 movie in the franchise, and that is Evil Bong. And I feel like just hearing the name, you guys could probably understand why I didn't sit through and watch all, like, I don't know, I think there's like 10, 11, 12 movies, and like, they're still making sequels to this franchise, believe it or not, to this day. Like, I don't know why, I don't know who the market audience is, but they're still making them to this day. But I sat through, I believe, like 6 or 7 of these movies, and I made it so far to the point where they eventually have the crossover with Evil Bong and Ginger Dead Man, and they become like a cohesive world at that point, and the Ginger Dead Man just keeps showing up in more and more sequels for reasons, I guess. But they are the least funny movies, and this was during an era where I used to smoke a lot of the weed or whatever, and even, like, being stoned off my ass, I could not enjoy these movies whatsoever, and especially now that I don't smoke, I don't think I would be able to find any kind of enjoyment out of them whatsoever. They're not good movies, man. I would say the first one's at least, like, semi-watchable, but even, like, that first one isn't a good movie, you guys. But they keep making them for some reason, so obviously they're making some kind of money off of Evil Bong, but how? I cannot tell you, because that's a contender for a franchise being worse than even Children of the Corn, honestly. But the last thing I have on this list is going to be the Ring franchise, and we are talking about the American trilogy, so there's 3 movies to cover. I've seen all 3. I've actually covered all 3 on this channel, so if you guys have seen those videos, you probably already know my opinion, but if not, the first Ring, I think, is a amazing movie. I think it is such a perfect 2000s horror flick, and I think it deserves more credit than it gets oftentimes, because it is the film that very much brought the wave of J-horror remakes to America. I think there's so much credit to give that film. I think Naomi Watts does an amazing job in this, and there's just so many aspects of it that are so good. Samara is such an iconic horror character who could be in so many amazing sequels, but And this is the big but. They didn't do that for her, though, because by the time you get to Ring 2, they suck all of the J-horror energy out of the film and they turn it into your basic American Exorcist story. So it's just a by-the-numbers sequel. And then by the time you get to Rings, the third entry, it's just so schlocky and stupid. Honestly, all the actors in it, and I believe I said this in my review back when I talked about the movie, like, they were all really pretty. Like, we can say that. Like, they were pretty, but they all looked like CW actors, and it felt like a CW production, and I just was not into it. I felt like the fear factor was gone, and it very much felt like Samara had ran her course before she had even started the race, honestly. So this franchise, a lot of, and I mean a lot of wasted potential at the end of the day. And it's sad to say because I do love that first Ring movie. It's a good movie, but my God, Samara, how the mighty have fallen. And now we are moving up to the next section of this tier list, and we're going for The Purge. So I'll be slightly less negative now, but overall, these are still not that good of franchises, and they leave a lot, and I mean a lot, to be desired. And the first one that's going to be up on that list for us to talk about is going to be the Rosemary's Baby franchise. And in total, there are 4 entries to this franchise, and I will say overall, 2 of the entries I do very much enjoy. One of them is just perfect, and then we have another one that's kind of and then by the time we get to the other one, it's shit the bed. But because the original Rosemary's Baby is so good, gives this franchise so many points for me. That original film is just so expertly made, and it's just beautiful to look at. It's one of my all-time favorite older flicks. And then by the time you get to the Paramount Plus prequel, I thought they did a really good job on that prequel. I really enjoyed it. I don't think it lived up to the standard of Rosemary's Baby, but they did a very good job on it, and I had fun with it. I actually did a video like a while back now where I did a comparison between the 2 films in like a versus thing. Obviously Rosemary's Baby won, but I enjoyed it for what it was. I can't say the same though about the TV remake that they made for Rosemary's Baby. It has some fun moments. There's some admittedly fun like gore sequences in it where they change up the source material a bit, but again, it's just kind of this copy-paste thing where they don't really expand much or do much different than what they did in the original Rosemary's Baby, so I don't feel much need to rewatch it, but I also don't hate it by any means either. It exists, is how I feel. But then you have the god-awful TV sequel from, I believe, the 80s that's like, Look What Happened to Rosemary's Baby. And we only have one actor that returns for that film. I believe her name is Ruth Ford, and she does an amazing job in the original Rosemary's Baby, being the kooky older neighbor. I love her because she's so good at comedy, but she also has this like little bit of sinister edge, and she plays it so freaking well. So I think it's cool she came back for a sequel, and I don't hate on her for wanting to make that coin whatsoever, but my God, that movie is so freaking stupid, and I can't even tell you what happened in it because it is such a forgettable, like, nothing movie that didn't need to be made. But again, I don't hate this franchise, so that's why it's not at the bottom, and it ended up in the Purge section, because if I could, I would probably just purge off this entry, and then, like, maybe I would the TV version, but, like, maybe we can let it pass, because it's relatively inoffensive overall. And then next up is going to be the Sleepaway Camp franchise, and there are over 5 entries in this franchise, and I have seen all 5 for better or for worse. And I will say the first 3 Sleepaway Camps, if you treat it like a trilogy, I have fun with it. I know that there are people who aren't the biggest fan of 2 and 3, but I think they're good. I enjoy the first Sleepaway Camp because it's just such a bad, like, movie, but it's the camp, man. It does so much work for that film, and especially that stupid twist ending is so forced. I remember being a kid and watching that and just sitting there like, what's so scary about her having a penis and like being weirded out by that? But I guess that was just the 80s and like people being scared of like queer people, I guess, or whatever. But it's just extremely laughable now looking back at it, and I love it. I think it's awesome. By the time you get to the second movie, the franchise knows what it is. They're not trying to make anything highbrow. Like, you're coming to watch this campy, stupid horror flick. It's essentially about this transgender person murdering people, and I had fun with it. The summer camp vibes are there, and like all that, and they have all these really stupid, schlocky deaths. It's by the time you get to the third movie that it kind of starts to take a bit of a nosedive, because the third movie is not the best, but like, it's passable. It's not as memorable as the second movie, and I feel like they used a lot of the ideas they had that were good in that second film, so by the time they had the third one, they didn't really have much to do with it. And then by the time you get to the fourth one, which is like almost impossible to find Sleepaway Camp the Survivor, it's essentially kind of like Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, where there's like a little bit of footage of a movie in there, but overall it's just a clip show of the previous movies. And then the little bit of footage that they have in it is so incohesive because they were filming this Sleepaway Camp film, but then they ended up not having enough money to make the movie, so they ended up canceling plans for this film after like only a couple days of production, if I remember correctly. So this is all they had, but then they decided that they wanted to schlop something out, and there was no need for it, and the footage that they did have wasn't anything spectacular or all that interesting or even all that good. And then by the time you get to Return to Sleepaway Camp, it's essentially a requel. It ignores all the events of the previous films and is only a sequel to that first film. And you even have Felissa Rose returning to play the character of Angela, which admittedly, I'm glad to see it. I think that's cool she came back. But also, it's not a good movie. It's such a slog to get through, and it has some of the worst dialogue in it, and the kills are not even that fun. And at that point, it just felt like it was trying too hard to be campy. So it's not a franchise that I would love to go through and watch all the entries in, especially, like, honestly, like, 1, 2, we can be done. 3, like, okay, we can live with it, but, like, after that, you're fucking pushing it, man. And coming up next is going to be the Wishmaster franchise, which this franchise I saw in a review that Dead Meat did ages ago on their podcast, how they say this movie feels way more 80s than it does 90s, even though it came out in the 90s. And I have to say I agree, but I have a little bit of dumb fun with these movies. Again, they're nothing that special. They're very campy. I think the Djinn is a really fun character. The first 2 entries I think are really good. It's kind of like a Sleepaway Camp situation where I enjoy the first 2 entries a lot. And by the time you get to the third, it's like, not as good, not so into it. And then the fourth one just kind of shits the bed, and it's not a good movie. And it's just, again, straight-to-video garbage. I feel like that's where a lot of these franchises die, unfortunately, in these bottom and lower areas of the list is straight-to-video garbage. And it's really sad to say because, they could have done something way better with that character. These movies weren't good to begin with, but, like, they were good. They hit that, like, perfect sweet spot of, like, good and bad. And then they just could not figure out how to, like, stay in that area whatsoever, man. So, poor Ginny Boy, he just can't go any higher on the list, unfortunately. And, of course, I feel like this is one of the first bigger, or at least big-ish franchises that I'm going to be talking about on this list. And that is going to be the Wrong Turn movies. And yes, I have seen all 7 of the Wrong Turn movies at some point or another, and am I a better person for it? Probably not, but for some reason, I do find some charm with these movies, because they're all just brainless slashers for the most part. I think the first one is a fun 2000s, like, cheesy horror flick that you can very much tell it took inspiration from things like The Hills Have Eyes, but instead of being in the desert, let's put it in the forest. is what I feel like this entire franchise is at the end of the day. I think the second one goes for more gore, and I have fun with it. And then after that, it kind of just starts to like take like a slow trajectory downhill with each sequel. I think that by the time you hit the fourth movie is when I kind of just get over it a little bit, and it becomes way too much about gore and having boobs on your screen. What does a lot of work though for this franchise and getting it higher up, other than like the first like 3 movies being decent enough, is the newest entry is such a perfect movie. I think they did such a freaking good job on it, and I would love to see the franchise continue in that direction instead of having the inbred hillbillies, having it be this like society of people that are in the woods doing messed up shit. I think that's really cool and like a way more horrifying and interesting angle to follow, but I don't think we're gonna get a sequel to that film, unfortunately. But it was a really good remake, and I think that they should have more remakes like it, where it just kind of takes the idea of something, or like the baseline idea of something, and then decides to completely do its own thing with it. I wish we saw more remakes that had the balls to be that different and try something else versus giving us a copy-paste thing like most franchises do. But overall, this franchise, again, not a very good one. Most of the movies are very bottom of the barrel, straight to video, garbage at the end of the day. I believe that everything after the first movie, in fact, is all straight to video nonsense. So I don't really have much else to say about the Wrong Turn franchise. The gore effects are really cool in these movies, and I just don't feel much love for our 3 titular mutants. I think it's really weird that we got like 2 separate prequels to talk about their backstory, because who was asking for it? Like, who was watching that original Wrong Turn and was like, huh, I wonder how these guys became who they became in this film. Like, nobody cared. I promise you, nobody cared. It's just a brain dead slasher at the end of the day. So they made some interesting choices with this franchise that I personally wouldn't have made. Hell, I probably wouldn't even have made half these movies in this franchise. But overall, like, it is rather inoffensive to me. The sequels, like, that suck, like, aren't painful for me to rewatch, even if I'm not the biggest fan of them. Coming up next on the list is going to be the Phantasm franchise, and there are 5 movies in total in this franchise. And the biggest reason why it ranks so low on this list is because even though I had a lot of fun when I went through and watched all these movies, I don't feel like there is that much of a rewatchability factor for me with most of the sequels. I think the first 2 are extremely solid flicks, and then after that, I just kind of feel like it loses me. Like, it was entertaining enough for me to do a one-time watch for, and like seeing like this very like weird, messy world it was building. But I also just don't really have much interest in seeing any of those films again. I think the Tall Man is an extremely iconic character of horror. I think he's really cool, especially for B horror. I feel like he would be up there for the better ones. I feel like he would very easily top characters like the Djinn or Angela from Sleepaway Camp. I think that the actor for him does a fantastic job, and he has such an iconic voice in the films. But overall, I'm just not the biggest fan of this franchise because the rewatchability just isn't there for me. And it's such like a weird like trip, all these movies, because it constantly feels like a dream because you're going into stories, but then you're retconning other things with each entry, and you're like being led to believe like, oh, this didn't happen like this, it happened like this. But it just feels super like weird and like fantastical, especially by the time you get to the 5th entry. It kind of just feels like the entire franchise was the warped perception of a man who has dementia and is in an old folks home and is like misremembering things. It's been a while since I've seen that movie, so maybe I'm misremembering that, but I think that's what it all led up to. So a really weird way to end off your franchise, I guess, but I don't feel much need to rewatch it and see that story unfold. The first two entries, though, like I said, though, are really fun. One is like that perfect like sweet spot for like cheap 70s horror, and then by the time you get to the second one, it's like came out in the 80s, and it's just like the perfect like 80s flick. So I heavily recommend those, and I don't think enough people have at least seen the Phantasm movies, so watch those first two. Don't really worry about the rest, but those first two are really good movies. And coming up next, and I feel like I have never heard anybody actually talk about this franchise, so I don't even know if anybody remembers it, because it is a pain in the ass to be able to find a way to even watch these movies, but is the My Super Psycho Sweet 16 trilogy. And I feel like people who have seen these movies would have probably put them in the bottom of the list in the Get Out section, but something about really bad teen horror sometimes just itches that spot for me, man. And in the My Super Psycho Sweet 16 movies, it's essentially a parody of the reality show from the early 2000s, My Super Sweet 16, but instead it ends up becoming a slasher movie. And in this trilogy, we follow Sky, who essentially is learning more and more about her past with each film. Her father was a serial killer and killed all these people, and in the first movie, he comes back and redoes the killings again. I think that first film is so cheesy, but it is so much fun, especially once you get to the final act of the film and they're at the Super Sweet 16 and you have all these crazy kills going on. Like, yeah, they were very made for TV, but they were super fun. And any movie that will murder somebody and have the song Miss Murder playing during the scene deserves props, just saying.
Have a super birthday, Madison. I always knew you were a psycho! You loser! You're nothing! You're nobody! You suck!
By the time you get to the second movie, it kind of feels like a Nickelodeon sequel or something you would see on the Disney Channel. Not a good movie. Third movie, kind of similar vibe, but like it picked it back up. I enjoyed that you have like this whole like fight sequence between Sky and her sister, who has kind of gone crazy at this point. I will not say much more for fear of spoilers, I guess, because I don't think enough people have seen this franchise. They're not good movies, but like they're one of those movies where like they're so bad they're good, at least to me anyways. If you like that like really cheesy like teen drama type story, like I think this might scratch that spot for you, but I couldn't put it any higher than the Purge section, because if I could, I would get rid of the second entry in this franchise. Not that good, but the first one, iconic, and the third one, passable enough. It capped off the franchise, so what more could you ask for? Now, coming up next on the list is going to be the Fly franchise, and this is one of those ones where I haven't seen all of the entries. I've seen, out of the 5, 4 of them, and I very much love the Cronenberg remake. It is one of my all-time favorite horror movies. In fact, I think it is such a good job, and again, is one of those instances where it does the remake perfectly, where it took the idea and then like ran with it in its own direction. I love how they used it here. The original Fly is admittedly a very fun like 50s horror flick, and it like very much like hits that perfect sweet spot, like the weird iconic like science-y horror subgenre that was really popular in the 50s. The second movie I had a decent amount of fun with. In the original franchise, it's when you start getting to other sequels that I very much am just kind of like, burn it with fire, because The Fly 2, the sequel to the Cronenberg film, has no place in this world. I don't think it needs to exist. The second movie is essentially just a sequel following the baby Gina Davis was pregnant with at the end of the first film, but showing him full grown and becoming a fly. I don't think it was needed. It's one of those very unnecessary sequels that nobody asked for, and I just, that's how I feel about that movie. The second Fly for the original franchise, I had fun with it, but that might have mostly been because, like, the main actor in it was kind of hot, so he was easy to look at. But it wasn't anywhere near as fun or iconic as the first movie by any means, and it did stop me from watching the third film in that original trilogy of films. So again, like, I like these movies. I think the remake is hands down one of the best remakes that we've ever seen. But overall, like, I don't feel the need to sit through all 5 movies in this franchise. Honestly, ever. And coming up next on the list is going to be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. And there are over, I think, 9, 10 movies in this franchise. I've lost count. I have seen all of them in this franchise, though. So, I feel like I'm allowed to have the opinions I have for it being this low. And I don't think most people would agree with me. Hell, some might have even put it a step lower than I did. But I will admit, I have some fun with this franchise. But my god, Leatherface is very similar to Pinhead, where my poor leather boy, what the hell did they do to you, man? Because you had all of the ingredients to be one of the most iconic slasher franchises, but then they just completely shit the bed with it. But overall, I don't mind a lot of sequels in this franchise. There are a lot to be desired, though. The first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, again, is one of my favorite horror films of all time. The second movie is just a very campy, schlocky 80s horror slasher vibe, so I have fun with it. I think Stretch is a very iconic final girl, and I love her in that film. But then the third through, like, 5th movie are next to unwatchable, especially the 5th movie. It is hands down one of the worst movies I have ever seen. Even Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger could not save that film. So I feel like that says a lot for your movie. The remake, I'm not the biggest fan of. I know a lot of people like the remake, but I would much rather just watch the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre than the remake. The second one, though, the prequel to the remake, I did have fun with that one. I don't know what the consensus is on that movie, but it was a pretty fun brain-dead slasher. And then Texas Chainsaw 3D. Again, I had fun with it. It's a very stupid movie, and you kind of have to turn your brain off for it. And that's a lot of the movies in this franchise. Even by the time you get to the Netflix remake, it's a very brain-dead movie, but my god, I kind of love that entry. And I know that's, like, blasphemous. I know so many people talked shit on it, but it is the easiest, dumbest popcorn flick to turn on and just have a good time seeing Leatherface kill all these stupid people. Like, I had fun with it. I don't know what else I could have asked for, honestly, because I don't expect a good movie from this franchise by now. So I just expect to be entertained, and that one did the job, so I actually really enjoy the Netflix Texas Chainsaw. But overall, these movies, I just feel like there's no continuity in the Texas Chainsaw franchise. And that's something that I love in a horror franchise. And you're going to see in, like, my top tiers, in fact, is when you have, like, a lore build-up and, like, you can see a franchise that's trying to build off earlier entries. I don't even mind if you retcon stuff, as long as you stay true to, like, stuff that you've talked about in other films and, like, bring stuff back. I think that's really fun. I like to feel the cohesive universe rather than just seeing, like, all of these, like, stupid standalone sequels that nobody cares about. And I feel like that's really all the Texas Chainsaw franchise really is. I'm just not a big fan of it. I don't think they did a really good job with Leatherface. And again, they let my poor leather boy down in these movies because we got some really, really big stinkers in here. But on to the next, and that is going to be the Grudge franchise, the American remake franchise anyways, and there are 4 movies in total, and out of the 4, I like the first 2, and then after that, it just kind of takes a nosedive a little bit. And something I love about the Grudge movies is I love how disconnected but connected all of the stories are in the film. I think that it is really cool how they all eventually tie into each other at the end, and the good Grudge movies know how to tie these stories together where it all ends up kind of making sense by the end of the film. But I feel like some of the sequels in this franchise just did not know how to do that, because the first 2 movies I thought did a really good job with that. I know people have their thoughts on the second movie, but I actually really liked it. I think there's some really good, like, jump scare scenes in that second movie. But by the time you get to the third movie, they drop that filming and like writing style altogether, and they just go for a more cohesive story. And again, they just kind of Americanized the idea of The Grudge way too much by that entry. And then by the time you get to the fourth movie, it's not even really a Grudge film. I feel like it was marketed as being a remake, and it ended up being like a soft sequel to the original trilogy, but it's not a good movie. It is the most forgettable film, and you don't even have Kayako returning or her son in this film, so I don't know why it was needed, and it just is not a good movie. I would never recommend anyone waste their time on that film, not even my worst enemy. Like, avoid that at all costs. Like, there is no reason it should have been made, or even in the Grudge franchise, honestly. But overall, I enjoy the Grudge movies. I would say that I prefer them over the Ring franchise. That's why it ended up a tier above it, but it does leave a lot to be desired, and I guess that'll segue a little bit into what the next entry is on this list, which is the Ju-on franchise, which, unlike the Ring franchise, I haven't seen that many of the Ringu movies. I just was never really captivated that much by the Sadako story, but Kayako and the Grudge movies, I have a lot of fun with her character, and believe it or not, there are like 9, 10 of these Ju-on movies, and the Ju-on movies essentially are kind of the same song and dance a little bit as the Grudge American remakes for it. They very much do the same thing over and over again with all the sequels. Like, essentially, I guess the best example I can think of is, imagine the Friday the 13th franchise and how every single sequel you have the characters at the summer camp and you have Jason hunting them down, but instead you have Kayako in every single sequel, and all these people keep going back to Kayako's house, and then it turns into them like seeing Kayako coming down the stairs yet again, and then them falling on the floor in fear as Kayako crawls towards them and eventually gets them. Then you have seen pretty much all the Grudge movies at some point, man. Like, you don't need to go that much farther into them, but for some reason I kind of have fun with most of them. But it does eventually come to a point where you get like halfway through it and you get a little over that song and dance of it just being the same thing over and over and over again. And I just am not a big fan of the later sequels because it doesn't bring any like new life into the franchise. What I will say though is I did very much enjoy the Netflix miniseries they did for Ju-on. I thought it was very disturbing, and it surprised me that Netflix was willing to like let a show push things that far. So if you haven't seen that show, I would say check it out. And if I remember correctly, if you're against subtitles, I believe there's actually a dub for that one. So definitely check it out. But if you're very sensitive to like certain kinds of horror, then maybe not, because it is like very messed up, some of the stuff that you do see. But I thought it was a good show. I thought they did a really good job of bringing new life into the franchise a little bit. But overall, if I had to go through and watch like all the Ju-on movies back to back to back, I would not be very impressed with you, honestly. But that capped off the last of my films in the Purge section. So now we're going to more of the we could take it or leave it type thing. And most of the sequels in these are relatively inoffensive to me. And the first one that's up in the section is going to be Hostel. Now, the first two Hostels I think are really good films. I very much actually enjoy even the whole idea of Hostel. I think it's really fun, but I just feel like they didn't need to make a franchise out of this, and by the time you get to the third one, you know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about. Because that first movie, I think, is just so nitty gritty and scary, and honestly, I think it's one of Eli Roth's best movies that he's made, because I'm not a big fan of Eli Roth, but I felt like the gore in this film was so well done. I thought the characters were very smartly written. I love the little bit of gay subtext that you have in that film. I thought the way that was included in there was very smart and kind of ahead of the time, honestly, for it coming out back then. But coming out in the 2000s when like being gay was a joke, because I feel like the subtext almost passes being subtext and is almost just text in the film. By the time you get to the second movie though, I think it becomes more tongue-in-cheek and campy, but like it's done right and well enough to where it's still a really fun movie. It's disturbing still, but it's still a fun flick. But that third entry, which again, it ended in straight to video garbage, and it just was not a good movie. They bring the hostel to America, and like that's really all I remember for it. I believe they're in Vegas too in that entry, and I just wasn't a fan of it. I didn't think it was a good way to end off the franchise, and it very much ended with a whimper and not a bang, and that's why it ranks so low, I guess. Coming up next though, and it disheartens me to say it, and maybe it will go a tier up once I've seen the fourth entry, but that is going to be the Horror in the High Desert franchise. And I don't know if you guys have even heard of this franchise. It's kind of a newer one, and it's super indie and low budget, but I have so much fun with the first two entries. I think they are very good found footage horror movies, and they're shot in the style of being a mockumentary as you're finding out about this weird mystery that's happening up in these mountains and up in this forest where all these people just keep disappearing. And there's a lot of these sequences that they film where if you like that slow burn aspect of found footage horror movies, I think this one will give you the heebie-jeebies, at least the first two. The third one, though, I felt like they kind of wore out the one trick they had in those first two movies because they worked so well in building suspense when you had like all these long shots that kept building and building and building as you were waiting for something to happen. And then when it finally did, it would scare the piss out of you. Versus by the time you get to the third movie, it just kind of is like, all right, we've seen this trick before. You can get to the point now. We're kind of over it. So that's what drops it so low. They're about to come out with a fourth entry, which I am still excited to see because I still have hope that this franchise is going to do something good, because at the end of the day, there isn't very much in horror that still gives me the heebie-jeebies, but something about found footage like this still like gets under my skin for some reason, and I really hope that they do something good with it. I believe it may already even be out. I just haven't gotten to it yet, but man, I really hope that things turn around for these movies, because I want people to talk about them and know about them, because those first two are just so damn good. And coming up next on this list is going to be the Firefly trilogy, and this is the Rob Zombie film trilogy. It follows House of a Thousand Corpses, Devil's Rejects, and then Three from Hell. I know that people have their problems with these movies, but I have like a little bit of nostalgia for them. I definitely saw The Devil's Rejects like way too young, like way too young. We're not even going to talk about that, but I remembered liking it as a kid, and I just got down with it, and I thought it was kind of freaky, so like it kind of holds a special place in my heart. I think that House of a Thousand Corpses is admittedly like fun yet kind of stupid slasher flick, but I have a good time with it. Three from Hell, though, I think was a really lame way to end off this trilogy of films, and that's what drops it so low for me, because I really like those first two entries, but like when one out of the three is bad, kind of similar to how I feel about the last franchise I talked about, I can't put you like any higher, because like 1/3 of your movies kind of suck, man. So I think the Firefly trilogy overall is fairly fun. I think it is some of Rob Zombie's best work was done in The Devil's Rejects. I don't think he's done anything to top that. And I know a lot of people have a lot of dislike for the Rob Zombie movies. I feel like I'm a lot kinder to them because I saw them as I was growing up. So I have nostalgia for a lot of them. But I also can see that, and I don't think that I could rank it any higher than this, because there's just so many other franchises that I can think of that I would turn on before I turned on the Firefly trilogy. Like, it's as simple as that. But coming up next, and this is a little bit of like a B-rated deep cut, I guess, maybe not, we'll see, but it's the Slumber Party Massacre franchise, and there are 4 total movies in this franchise. We're not going to include any of the other massacre films that are weirdly connected to it, because I know you have like the Cheerleader Massacre movies and like the Sorority House Massacre, and I've seen a couple of the Sorority House Massacre movies, and if I included those, this franchise would be dropping probably down to the Get Out section. But we're not doing that, because I feel like those are like a break off and like their own thing at the end of the day. The Slumber Party Massacre franchise, though, it's way different than like other 80s franchises, like, I wouldn't say, like, entirely different, because at the end of the day, they're still, like, you're very much, like, B-rated slasher movies, but they do it from a different angle. All the films in this franchise were shot by women, and they were written by women, and they try to show women in more powerful roles versus what you would see in your typical 80s slasher flick. I think inherently that's a really cool angle to see a film in. I think the remake too does a really good job of pushing that even forward, more with it being more campy and like showing like the men more sexualized and dumb in that entry versus seeing the women like that.
Is this what guys actually do when they're alone?
It's so depressing.
I don't really like the direction the remake takes like halfway through the film, because it goes from being like this really fun campy flick to like going to like a more nitty grittier serious tone, and it kind of just felt like it came out of left field, and I wish it would have stuck with that same tone that it had for like the first half of the movie, give or take. The first film, though, I think is a really fun, just cheap slasher flick. Like, you turn it on and you know what you're getting. You're gonna get a whole bunch of girls running around and dying, and a slasher killer lurking the halls. Like, I don't know what else to say about it. The second movie is very schlocky 80s fun, because instead of your driller killer from the first film, you have a guy running around with an electric guitar that has a drill on the bottom of it, and he even has like this whole dance montage. Like, the whole movie is just a trip. Like, I feel like you have to watch Slumber Party Massacre 2 to even like understand what was even going on in that film. But the third movie, I just feel like, again, it's the first movie, but done not as well, and there was like a lot more studio involvement, so they kind of ended up forcing them to include some scenes of like the girls being more violently killed and stuff like that, which kind of icky, like, and I feel like it kind of defeats the purpose of what this franchise is going for, and it's not on the directors at all, but like, I think it's kind of sad that the studios decided to bastardize what was kind of like a feminist film series in the first place, but whatever. But overall, like, these are kind of brain dead slasher movies. Like, I have fun with them, but I would never want to like watch them back to back. I feel like it's kind of a thing where like, oh, I'm in the mood to watch one of these, but to watch the entire franchise in one go, like, no thank you. No, thank you. And coming up next on the list is going to be the Basket Case trilogy. And again, this is another instance, kind of like the Firefly trilogy, where like 1/3 of your movies kind of suck, man, so we're not going to put you any higher. But I do admittedly have a little bit of a soft spot for Belial. That first Basket Case movie is so low budget and so schlocky and bad, but it like scratches like that perfect spot for me of like being like a bad horror. And the second movie, you can tell they got more budget, they spent more time in the writing room, and I love a lot of the prosthetics of the freaks that you see in that film. I think they did a really good job with the second film, and even like the really dark twist ending of the film where they turn that reporter into a freak just like them, I think is very reminiscent of the Todd Browning film from the 30s, Freaks. I think that's really cool, and seeing like an 80s adaptation idea that kind of like spins from that, I think is really neat. But by the time you get to the third movie, it's one of those things again where I feel like the franchise has run its course. They ran out of ideas and they didn't know what else to do with it, so they just slopped out another film. And I don't feel like the heart in that entry, because that's something I enjoyed about those first two Basket Case movies, is I felt like you could see the love that was put into them. But by the time we get to the third one, there's not much need for any more entries in this franchise, and it very, very much showed with that movie. But if you like schlocky 80s horror flicks that are like extremely cheap, like I would say think of like the first Terrifier, but like put that in like 80s budget format, and that would be the first Basket Case. But Belial is like, he's a fun little bastard. Like, he's a fun little bastard. Like, that's all I can really say about him. There isn't a whole lot else I feel like I can say about these movies on the top of my head. Like, I enjoy them for what they are, but they also aren't going to go any higher on the list because And this one might be blasphemy. That is yet to be determined, but next up is going to be Night of the Living Dead. And there are admittedly some really, really iconic movies in this franchise, movies that I absolutely love. I think the original Night of the Living Dead is such a perfect movie. I even love the remake with Tony Todd. I think he did such a great job of stepping into that main role. The original Dawn of the Dead, I am not the biggest fan of, but again, that might just be like my nostalgia blinding me because my original Dawn of the Dead was the 2000s remake because that's what I saw when I was a kid, and I love that movie, and that's included in this franchise, so we'll throw it on there. And then with Day of the Dead is such a good movie. I think it is the best sequel in this franchise, hands down. But it is the rest of the franchise that I'm just not so much of a fan of. I know Land of the Dead has its defenders, but I'm not a big fan of it. Diary of the Dead, again, I know people hate that movie, but I don't really feel one way or the other. I'm a little indifferent to it. Like, it's not a good movie, but, like, I don't hate it by any means. It's by the time you get to Survival of the Dead, though, where I fully understand the hatred for these later sequels, because wow, what a way to end your franchise. Survival of the Dead is not a good movie, man. But overall, like, there are some really good movies in this franchise, but most of them I just feel like are inoffensive, forgettable, or just outright bad. The whole concept of them focusing in and doing a different story with each sequel, I think is admittedly a fun idea, and I do enjoy that. But I wish it would have been done to better effect here, because what we got at the end of the day, just, it was not serving. It was not serving what I wanted from this franchise, and from like what those original films set up from whatsoever. But also, I didn't think I could put this that much lower, because at the end of the day, this is what ended up turning zombies into what they are today, essentially. And I think that there is a lot of credit that needs to be given to George A. Romero. I mean, he already gets it, but like, we're just gonna throw it out there again. Like, the man deserves so much credit for giving us the modern zombie and how it is, because we wouldn't have 28 Days Later, we wouldn't have The Walking Dead if it wasn't for George A. Romero's take on zombies at the end of the day. So that's why this ranks on this part of the list, but overall, like, we're not gonna go any higher with it because it's good, but like, it's not great. But coming up next on this list is going to be the Black Christmas franchise, and there are 3 official releases for this franchise. The original Black Christmas, and then we have 2 different remakes, and I think the original Black Christmas, and everybody who's seen that movie and talks about it on YouTube says it, but it is an extremely underrated movie. I think that more people need to know about it and talk about it, because it's not just your typical brain dead slasher flick. Like, there is so much going on in this movie and so much heart, and I think it does such a good job with messages that it throws in there. And I love the pro-choice storyline that it has in there, where you have our main character who gets pregnant and she doesn't care what her boyfriend says. She's going to get an abortion because her body, her choice. I think it's really cool that they added that storyline into such an older movie. I also think many of the kills in it are extremely memorable and well executed. And then you have the 2000s remake, which isn't a smart movie. I can't say anything I just said about the original movie with the 2000s movie, but I have my dumb fun with it. It's very much your schlocky 2000s horror flick, like what you expect from any 2000s horror movie. You're going to see a bunch of pretty people with stupid dialogue and they're going to die, and I have fun with it. And Mary Elizabeth Winstead is in it, and I love her. Such an iconic scream queen in horror, especially for that era, and I wish she would show up in more horror flicks, but I'll digress on that, I suppose. But it's by the time you get to Black Christmas, the 2010s remake, my God, that movie is so fucking stupid, and I don't think I have any plan on ever rewatching it, because unlike the original movie, where I feel like its political, like, underlying story I thought was really well written into the film, this movie I feel like forced its messaging. And again, it's something that I don't like when franchises do. I don't like when they take a message and then they just like spoon feed it to you. That, and I feel like there is nothing to do with actually being anything similar to the original Black Christmas. It just took the IP's name and slapped it on here so that they could make a couple extra bucks in the box office. Like, I'm convinced that's what happened behind the scenes with this movie. But if you want to see an unofficial good Black Christmas movie, you should definitely check out the It's Me, Billy fan series that's on YouTube. They did a really good job of doing a follow-up to the original Black Christmas, and they even had plans to bring back the original final girl of that franchise, but unfortunately she wasn't able to be in it because of health problems that she was having. But it still ended up being a really good flick, and I think they did a fantastic job of staying in the spirit of the original Black Christmas. But overall, because of that third entry and that remake being so god-awful, I could not put this any higher on the list because I absolutely love that 2010's Black Christmas. It is such a bad fucking movie. Now, coming up next is going to be the Resident Evil franchise, and there is, I believe, 9 different films that you can count all together for this franchise and a TV series. Quote me if I'm wrong, because you have the Mila Jovovich films, which is like 6. You have the reboot film, and then you have the 2 or 3 animated films, give or take. I think there might be more, actually. I'm not sure. And then you have the Netflix TV show, obviously. But overall, I feel like this franchise is very much just early 2000s, like horror, action, cheesy schlock value vibes yet again. I have a lot of fun with the first entry. I even think the second entry is on a similar level to me in this franchise. It's after this where the franchise starts to get a little messier with me, where I can very much like leave it or take it for a lot of the films. I think Resident Evil Retribution is fun, even with all the dumb fan service that they add into all of the film. But what I can't praise is the final chapter, because they set up so much dumb fan service in the Retribution and then just served nothing. And all these new characters that they introduced to the franchise from the video games, they did nothing with in the next film. And I know that purists of Resident Evil probably have, not even probably, definitely have a lot of problems with the original film franchise. I personally don't, because I never played the video games, so I'm not like a Resident Evil purist. I just enjoy the dumb fun of these movies, but I'm sure if I played the games, they would probably piss me off a lot more, especially if I was excited to hear they were coming out with a Resident Evil movie and they served me something that was entirely different from the games. Then I probably would have been pretty damn upset too, if I'm being honest. But overall, I am not the biggest fan of this franchise. There are a few entries in it that I think are really great, that are really fun. There are some that I think are kind of passable, but then overall, just kind of eh. I even enjoy a couple of the like animated films that they have in this franchise. They're not anything that I would go out of my way to like rewatch, but if someone else turned them on, I would be able to have a good enough time with them. The Netflix TV series, though, good God, I only made it like halfway through that before not even halfway, I don't think, now that I'm saying it out loud. I think I only made it like a couple episodes in before I like just dropped the ball and gave up on it, because not good. It was not a good series. And then the Welcome to Raccoon City that they did, I wasn't really a fan of that one either. I feel like that one was geared more towards the fans of the video game, but then it also forgot to like make an actual movie that everyone could enjoy at the end of the day, and was just too close to the fans of the games, so it made it like a little inaccessible overall. So I wasn't a big fan of Welcome to Raccoon City. It just felt really forgettable to me overall, and that is really the only thought I had about it. I am excited to hear that they do have a new franchise coming out for Resident Evil with someone else working on it. I am curious to see where that goes, but I also have like tapered the expectations, because a lot of stuff has been made for this franchise and a lot of it is just mediocre to like bad, but like when it's good, it can be really good. You see it with the first couple entries in this film franchise. So hopefully it leans more into that territory of just being a good, entertaining time and like making everybody happy. The video game fans, just the fans that haven't seen Resident Evil but don't need to like be gatekeeped from it, even though they haven't played the games. I just think it'd be cool if they hit all those aspects. So as of recording this video, the trailer hadn't dropped and I just watched it, and holy crap, The trailer for the new one actually looks really damn good, so my expectations are less tapered and very much heightened. I actually think the new one might be a really good movie. That's all for now from Future Justice. We're not talking about a new future movie that hasn't come out yet. We're talking about the current franchise, and overall, I could take it or leave it. It isn't anything that's offensive to me. Most of the sequels don't even bother me that much. They are just kind of like they exist. Really, the only ones, like I said, that I have a true problem with are the final chapter. I think it's a really shitty way to end off a franchise. Very rarely does horror know how to end a franchise with it being, like, actually an enjoyable finish. But also the Netflix show, really bad. Don't recommend that. And coming up next on the list is the Scary Movie franchise, which is fitting seeing as we have Scary Movie 6 coming out here in June. Maybe it's a hot take to have Scary Movie in the section. I don't know if someone would have it higher or lower. I'm the middle ground kind of dude. I think the first Scary Movie is such a fun movie. I think it even overshadows at times some of the movies it's parodying. And I'm not meaning that, like, that first Scary Movie is better than some of the movie it's parodying. I mean, as in, I'll be watching those original movies, and as certain scenes are playing out, all I can imagine is the parody scene from Scary Movie rather than what's going to actually happen in the actual film. Just for example, when I'm watching I Know What You Did Last Summer and you have them hit the guy and they find the boot, I just imagine Sydney running out to the street and being like,
I didn't see it. It came out of nowhere.
Oh my god, we hit a boot!
anything to do with Brenda and Cindy is just chef's kiss. I absolutely love Rebecca Hall and Anna Faris in these movies. I think they do such a fantastic job, and I think that Brenda has almost become like a third person in mine and my partner's relationship, because since we've been together, we have constantly quoted Brenda lines to one another because she is just so iconic, and I am so glad that they're bringing her back for Scary Movie 6, because it is not Scary Movie without motherfucking Brenda in it. Where it kind of just goes to the section for me, though, is I feel like everything after the first film, it just gets like a little more a little worse, honestly. I think the second film is fun enough, not as good as the first one, but it's still a good enough time. It's Scary Movie 3 and 4 that I have like on a similar playing field with each other, where I'm kind of like over the parody movie aspect, and like I can watch them, but I don't really care to watch them or rewatch them either. And Scary Movie 5 is a dumpster fire. And what's pathetic is when I was in middle school, I went and saw Scary Movie 5, and for some reason I thought that movie slapped back in middle school, and I think it's just because I saw it in theaters and it was so exciting to see that movie in theaters. But I feel like it was very shortly after I saw it in theaters, and the hype of seeing it in theaters for the first time died off, or just seeing a scary movie in theaters for the first time died off. I realized just how fucking bad of a movie it actually was, and I have no interest in rewatching it. They made such a weird choice to recast both Cindy and fucking Brenda in that movie, because both those actresses just could not reach that level of comedy peak that both Rebecca and Anna Faris are able to reach. Like, need I say more? But overall, I don't think the Scary Movie franchise is anything that's amazing, but it also has a couple of chill movies in it that I do enjoy, that I think are kind of fun. So, and I'm excited for Scary Movie 6, so there's that. But coming up next is going to be the Strangers franchise, and I feel like this one is definitely a hot take that I have it like in the middle ground, like section. I think a lot of people would have probably put it into the Purge or the Get Out section that I have, maybe even the Get Out section, honestly. And I've only seen 4 out of the 5 movies in this franchise so far, so I want to cap it off with that. But I really do enjoy the Strangers movies, even when they get really, really, really bad. I just, for some reason, hot take, I have fun with some of the dumb choices they have made with this franchise. The Strangers one, I think, is the perfect like home invasion movie. It actually hits the perfect mark of being like freaky and scary, and I enjoy that movie. I have a lot of nostalgia for it. I remember seeing just the trailer alone for that flick when I was a kid, and I thought it was like the most like mind-blowing crazy thing ever. The Strangers Prey at Night, though I am not the biggest fan of Prey at Night, there are admittedly a lot of scenes in it that I think they did really good on. I really enjoy how a lot of the chase sequences and the kills were filmed in this movie, and I think this movie came out too before like the whole 80s hype was overblown and overdone. So when they had like the very 80s soundtrack throughout the film, it didn't bother me. But the scene where the brother is getting attacked at the pool and you have him going underwater, above water, and it has like Total Eclipse of the Heart playing, I think iconic. Like a very lackluster movie, but like one of my favorite chase scenes in a horror movie in general from such a mid fucking movie. So like that alone like kind of raises it up a little bit. Then by the time you get to the rest of the franchise, this is where I'm going to start losing people, because Strangers Chapter 1 is a very much just a very poor remake of The Strangers. In fact, it's a very, very poor remake of the original Strangers with a lot of dumb choices made by all the characters in it, and it's not a good movie. But for some reason, I was still entertained and I had fun with it, and I have rewatched it since and felt the exact same way. So I kind of enjoyed The Strangers Chapter 1. Chapter 2 is a different story. I didn't hate it, which I know most people did, yet again. Like, I just am not a Strangers purist at the end of the day, so I didn't really care. But Chapter 2, I didn't hate it. I enjoyed seeing the follow-up to Chapter 1. It wasn't needed, but none of the people in it actually acted like people. I also feel like there was so many scenes in it that could have been cut out to just have been tacked on to the first movie, to have tried to have made it a more of its own thing versus being like a shot-for-shot remake of the original. I feel like if they would have done that, Chapter 2 and Chapter 1 together, maybe it would have been better. But man, people really need to stop announcing that they're making trilogies for movies, because it never ends well is what I'm seeing. And of course, The Strangers Chapter 3 is already out. Like I said, I haven't seen it yet, so I plan on watching it. Am I probably going to hate it? Probably not, because I've already scraped the bottom of the barrel of this franchise, and they really didn't bother me when they got to the bottom of that barrel. In fact, I was entertained by the bottom of that barrel. So I don't think it's going to bother me that much. It's going to be stupid. I already know that much, but we'll see whether or not I am entertained by it or just bored by it, because it's going to be one of those two things. But overall, it's not a franchise that I really care about that much at the end of the day. That's why it ranks so much lower on this list, or I guess just in the middle of the list. It wouldn't be lower. I guess at this point, it's right in that middle spot, that sweet spot for me, man, because I just don't think it's like anything amazing, but like also like, if you turned on and I were to marathon all these movies, it really wouldn't bother me. But would I myself pick that as my first watch to marathon? Probably not. And next up on the list is going to be the Conjuring universe. And I could have broken this up, but at the end of the day, all of the spin-offs are in the same universe of movies, and I didn't need to talk about them because it would have just been essentially me saying the same thing over and over again, because all the spin-offs for The Conjuring have the exact same problems and the exact same pros that the main franchise of films The Conjuring has. And the reason this movie falls in the middle of the list is because half this franchise is really good, impeccable, and like perfect, like modern classic horror to me, and then the other half of this franchise is just really lame cash grabs, and it's pretty easy to tell which ones are which. I don't think any of these movies have been offensively bad to me for the most part, but a lot of them are just really forgettable when you get to that second half of them. I think the first two Conjuring movies are essentially perfect horror. I love them. I even think the second one tops so much of that first movie. And just seeing Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga just going off of each other throughout the film, I think they are such a believable couple, and they have some of the perfect chemistry, and that's what I love about these movies, and I just love seeing their characters. But by the time you get to the third film, I think the third film is entirely forgettable and just lost the charm of the original first two. The newest entry, Last Rites, I do think it picked some of it back up, but it is nowhere near as well written or done as it was in the original 2 Conjuring films. And then as for the spin-offs, the Annabelle franchise, the first Annabelle is not that good of a movie. I can watch it, but it's boring. It is so freaking boring, and it is not what you want from an Annabelle movie. And that's why they course corrected with Annabelle Creation, the prequel, and that's a good movie. And then Annabelle Comes Home. It's like the spooky, like carnival haunted house movie of the franchise where Annabelle's just fucking with the Warrens' daughter in their house. I think that one's fun. It's not the scariest, but it's fun. It's like a good like roller coaster ride to go through. Then when you go to like the Nun franchise as a whole isn't that good. I can't stand the first Nun. The second Nun, I don't mind it. It has its problems, but it's relatively inoffensive to me. But that first one, for some reason, really pissed me off, man. And then The Curse of La Llorona is just a forgettable movie. I've seen it, but I can hardly tell you anything about it that wasn't in the damn trailer. So overall, like, yeah, there are some movies in this franchise that I think did a really good job and that are easily hands down classics of the genre, but there are also just as many in the franchise that are either forgettable or just bad. So it's really hard to be able to rank this higher, even though I would love to, but they really did drop the ball with this franchise. And a sad ball to drop too, because having a cinematic universe in the horror world would have been so cool if they could have just done it right. Like, us horror fans could have had our own fucking Marvel, but then they just had to go and mess it up, man. And coming up next on the list is the Blair Witch franchise, which has 3 total entries in it. And the reason it comes up at the middle of the list is because I feel like this franchise as a whole is like a very middling one. I don't actually dislike any of the movies in this franchise, which I feel like might be a shocker to some people, maybe not with some of the opinions I've already spouted in this video, but most of the sequels in this are just inoffensive to me and they don't bother me that much. I think the original Blair Witch is a really fun flick. I really enjoy it, and I love how low budget the whole thing is. I just think it adds to, like, the creepy factor as you see all these friends walking in the forest and like slowly getting turned around. And I don't even mind seeing them fighting with one another as they're becoming more and more paranoid and like stressed out by these woods that they can't seem to get out of. I think it is a genuinely creepy idea. The second Blair Witch, not a good movie. Again, not a good movie, but entertaining for the dumb choices that it makes, to me at least. And then by the time you get to the third one, I don't think that movie is bad by any means, but I also don't think it does anything that new. It's just your typical found footage movie at that point, and it's nothing special. And it very much lost like the charm that the 90s one had because it's the higher budget and all that. And I feel like the higher your budget is in a found footage movie, the less scary it's gonna be, because the whole point of found footage is for it to look like kind of cheap, because it's supposed to look more real. And like when you have everything looking so perfect, then like it's not so real at that point now, is it, man? But overall, I don't really have a lot to say about this franchise because I really don't feel one way or the other about it. I don't hate any of the sequels in it, but I also don't really care about this franchise as a whole. So that's why it like kind of lands at the middle, because like whatever to it, honestly. But coming up next, we're going to be talking about Wolf Creek. And Wolf Creek kind of breaks the rules that I set up at the beginning, kind of not, and I'll explain why. Because Wolf Creek has 2 TV seasons and 2 movies, so altogether I feel like that counts up to 3 things instead of just the 2 movies or whatever, so bite me. I have seen the 2 movies and the TV show, or at least the first season of the TV show, and I think the first 2 Wolf Creek movies are really freaky. I love them. I think Mitt Taylor does such a freaky horror character as he runs around the outback killing tourists and all that. I think the first film is very much leaning into the horror and all that, and like being scary and genuinely spooky, versus the second one leans more into the camp of it all. And I actually really enjoy the campy edge, and there were so many scenes in that second one that just make me cackle. I mean, I'm thinking of that kangaroo scene. If you've seen it, you know, man. But by the time you get to the TV show, I think that they could have done something fun with the series, but I just feel like it felt really drawn out. I only watched the first season of it, so maybe it picked up in the second season because I'm pretty sure it's an anthology, but I just didn't really like it. I thought the first season was really boring, and I didn't really care about the main protagonist as she was trying to hunt down Mick Taylor or whatever. I just wasn't really a fan of it, and it just felt forgettable. I'm even struggling to remember anything about it, and I watched the whole season, so there isn't really any reason for me to not be able to tell you anything about it. I just genuinely can't think of anything for it either. So, like, it's a good enough franchise, but I also don't think it, like, borders on being amazing by any means either. Coming up next, though, is going to be Carrie, and you guys may already know my opinions on the Carrie franchise. I mean, I did cover all, like, 5-6 entries in this franchise. I'm trying to remember how many there were now, man. Because in the Carrie franchise, of course, you have the Stephen King novel, you have the original film, then you have 2 different remakes, then you have the sequel, and then you have the musical. So I guess like 6 things altogether. And for the most part, I don't mind most of this franchise. The book was actually my introduction to Stephen King's novels, so it gives this franchise a lot of points in my head. And then the original Carrie is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I think it's so expertly done. And I think Robert De Palma does such a good job with the filmography in that film. I absolutely love how it looks, and it's so gorgeous. And Sissy Spacek is hands down the best Carrie we've ever been given. The Angela Bettis remake, I just wasn't a fan. It's just cheap TV movie garbage. I can't rewatch that movie, man. It's 2 hours too much, man. And the Chloe Grace Moretz one, a lot of people hate it. I have nostalgia for it because that's my Carrie, kind of, because that's the one that came out when I was in high school, and that's what hyped me up to read the original book in the first place. So, yeah, it's just a copy-paste remake of the original, but, like, also, like, I enjoy it for my own personal reasons, so I don't really care what anybody else thinks. In the sequel, Carrie 2, very unnecessary sequel, inoffensive, but very unnecessary and not needed, and I don't really care about that movie. There are ideas in it that I think are fun enough, but the execution in it just felt really messy to me overall. And of course, the musical, again, a lot of the things I can say about that can be said about the musical too. The musical, I feel like, is interesting, and it has like a couple of songs that I enjoy, but overall, just kind of a type thing. I could take it or leave it for the most part, because I don't think they did a really good job of fully capturing the story, which I think could be possible, but they just didn't manage to do it there. So there isn't necessarily any entry in this franchise that I full-on hate. The closest thing I could even say to full-on hating in this franchise is the TV movie, but even then, there are some things that I can praise in that film, because I think Angela Bettis does a really good job as Carrie in that movie, so I'll give her props where they're due and all that. Just overall, not that good of an experience. But this franchise, again, rather inoffensive. There isn't anything that full-on upsets me in these movies, but what will be upsetting to some people for what I put in the section, and you guys might need your pitchforks soon and your tomatoes, and have them ready to throw at me as well, because I put Halloween here, so yeah, sorry about that, guys. If you've watched my channel at all for a little while, you'll know that I have some relatively lukewarm feelings about the Halloween franchise as a whole. Michael Myers just isn't really my guy. I've seen every entry in this franchise at some point or another, and there's just so many other slasher franchises that I enjoy more than Halloween. I think Michael Myers and Laurie Strode in the films are some of the more enjoyable entries for me, but overall, I'm not the biggest fan of the Michael character and how it's handled in these films. I don't know, like, I know that's a hot take. He's just not my cup of tea, though, honestly. I am not the I'm not even the biggest fan of the original Halloween. Again, throw your tomatoes at me, guys. It just kind of bored me a little bit, but I do enjoy Halloween 2, even with its problems. I had fun with Halloween 2. I think Seasons of the Witch is a really good movie, not a Halloween movie, really, but Seasons of the Witch is really fun. I die on that hill. And then both 4 and 5, I have fun with. I know a lot of people hate 5, but I had fun with 5, even with as stupid as it got. I had fun, and I even liked Tina a little bit, if we're being completely honest. But I'm not a big fan of Halloween 6, I think that one kind of sucks. I think H2O is surprisingly good. Its follow-up with Revelations or whatever. Is that what that one's called? I can't remember off the top of my head. But that one, not a good movie. Entertaining for what it is, but not a good movie. We didn't need Busta Rhymes doing kung fu against Michael. Like, again, who asked for that in this franchise? And then when you jump forward to the Rob Zombie remakes of these films, I enjoy the first one because, like I was saying earlier with Devil's Rejects, I grew up with it. That was my Halloween as a kid, so that first one I actually really enjoy. The second one, I can't give any praise to. I think that second one is a really, really bad movie, and a lot of it just feels more like a music video than it does actually a horror movie, so yeah, there's that. And of course, we get to the most recent trilogy, and I know a lot of people hate how this trilogy, like, built up after 2018 or whatever, but I really don't mind it that much. I think that the writing for it very much shows that they didn't have a trilogy planned when they came out with Halloween 2018, but I also, again, I'm not a Halloween purist, so I was just kind of there for the ride, and I had fun with what they did give us, because I thought Halloween 2018 was a great requel to the original film. I thought it was really great to see Jamie Lee Curtis back in the role. Halloween Kills, dumb fun, but it literally gives you what the title says. You have Michael Myers, and he kills people. Like, need I say more about it? And then Halloween Ends, I feel like decided to do its own thing a little bit, which odd choice for capping off your trilogy or whatever, but I don't really mind it that much either. I think it was kind of a ballsy move. I don't think it paid off entirely, but ballsy enough move, and I'll give credit where it's due. I didn't hate the movie by any means. I even thought the opening scene was actually, like, kind of shocking and a lot of fun, so I'll give the movie that much credit. Just overall, the Michael Myers Halloween movies and all that, just, they're not really my horror franchise at the end of the day, and it's not my favorite one to go back and rewatch, and I feel like it's so, like, hit or miss for which ones I actually do enjoy and do enjoy rewatching, that it just kind of makes it like a little bit of like an for me. Like, there are some that I really like, but then there are also others that I really don't like, or that just bore the socks off of me overall. So hopefully none of you guys hate me too much after saying that. And the last one up in the category for me is going to be the Candyman franchise. And I so wish that I could put this higher, because Tony Todd does a fantastic job as Candyman in every single entry of this franchise. I do not have a problem with him in any of these movies, even the bad ones. I don't have a problem with him in. But my God, Candyman, how the mighty have fallen. So hard for you, man. The original Candyman, I think, is so freaking good. It isn't just another brain-dead slasher. It has, like, a lot more smart writing to it, and I love seeing Helen and Candyman and how they interact with one another, and, like, the forbidden love story kind of angle almost with it. And the second movie, I am not as much of a fan of. It's kind of a lackluster sequel, but it is enjoyable seeing the backstory for Candyman and seeing how he was created and stuff like that. I do think all those flashbacks were really interesting and were actually a part of the movie that I did enjoy. The third entry, we just don't talk about that, okay? That's a bad straight-to-video movie right there, and the main character looks like she came right out of a porno for some reason, so we're just gonna pretend that movie doesn't exist, you guys. Like, ugh, gross. But the fourth movie, I thought they did a fantastic job. The requel that they did a couple years back now, I actually had a lot of fun with it. Like, there was some problems that were with that film, but overall, I enjoyed it, and I was really entertained by it, and I do think it was the best sequel that we've ever gotten to the original film in general up to this point. But overall, I just feel kind of to this franchise, because 2 out of the 4 movies, one of them I think is mediocre and the other one's kind of ass. So I just feel like I couldn't rank it any higher. So that caps off the section. Wish he could have gone higher, man, but Tony Todd will have his time to shine at another point, don't you worry. And now we are on to my second to final section. This is where I'm going to be entirely more positive to these films. Like, there will be some drawbacks, but overall, I enjoy most of the movies that I'm about to be talking about here. And the first one that we're going to be putting in the Dream Child section is 28 Days Later. And once I see the Bone Temple, that will decide whether or not this stays in this section or if it goes up to the next slot, because I love all three entries in this franchise. I think 28 Days, Weeks, and Years are all really good standalone movies, and I just love how different they are from each other. Yes, I have my problems with 28 Weeks Later. I said that in my review. It didn't feel anywhere near as good as 28 Days, and it lacked the heart that the original had, but it still had good aspects to it. 28 Years almost brought me to tears in a couple different spots, so I really enjoyed that movie. It really hit close to home to me, and I really hope that the Bone Temple is good. I just haven't gotten to watching it yet. Once I do get around to watching it, I'm sure I'll probably do a review on it, just so I can finish out all the other reviews I've done on the other three movies. But I do have a gut feeling that it would knock this franchise up to being in the next slot. But as of now, just to be fair, because I haven't seen it, I can't say it's perfect yet, which that's entirely on me, and I hate myself for it a little bit, man, because I really do love all those movies that I have seen so far. Coming up next, though, is the Paranormal Activity franchise, and I feel like most people would have ranked this way lower, but I really enjoy found footage, man, and I really like the Paranormal Activity movies, and the Paranormal Activity movies do one thing that I enjoy in horror, and that is continuity, man. And it might be stupid continuity, but it's continuity none the fucking less. I think the first three Paranormal Activity movies, though, are like the perfect trilogy at the end of the day. I think they did such a really good job by the fact that they had the first film, which was such a like shock success and is like essentially the film that built Blumhouse. And then you have the second film, a prequel, which I feel like in horror is such a like knock of death, because prequels are very rarely ever any good in the horror genre, but they did such a good job with that prequel. And then again, number three, yet another prequel to the prequel and the first film, and another good job. And they always have really good jump scares in these earlier films, and like the memorable like big scare moment in the earlier sequences of it. I really enjoy those, and there's some of the more memorable scenes in horror for me in general. It's after the first three films where you kind of start losing me in this franchise, because I think 4 is a very forgettable movie, and then I think that 5, the Mark one's good one. I think they were able to turn it around and do something different with the franchise, because 4 was just the same old tricks yet again. And then by the time you get to the 6th, it goes back to the same old tricks yet again, and it's just kind of eh. Then you get to the final and most recent one, Next of Kin, and I had my fun with Next of Kin. I know a lot of people didn't like it, but I did enjoy that it was a different story, and it was rebooting what we'd previously seen while still being in that Paranormal Activity universe. It was just really fun for me to be back in that universe again. And of course, I forgot to mention almost is, and I don't think most people know it exists, so the like 2 people that might end up watching it that do, Paranormal Activity 2 Tokyo Night is a thing, and it is actually a, I believe, Japanese sequel that they made to this, and I actually really fucked with that movie. I thought that it was kind of fun, and in my head canon, it is in the canon of this franchise. I know technically it is not, but there is so many references to Katie in that movie, so it is in my head, just saying. So if you can find that movie and you're able to watch it, definitely recommend checking it out. But again, that one's kind of a bitch to find as well. But overall, I really enjoy the Paranormal Activity movies. There's only a couple that are like total stinkers for me in that franchise, but most of the movies I can get down with and I have fun with, and I like seeing the Katie story unfold throughout all the entries, and that's probably something you're going to see a lot in these higher ranked films. I really love a good story that is like getting pushed forward throughout the sequels. But coming up next, and it's another franchise that I have actually fully covered on this channel, is the Final Destination franchise. And the main reason that this one ranks so high is because there's only one movie in this entire franchise that I think is actually bad, and that would be Final Destination 4, because fuck that movie. That movie sucks so hard. But the rest of the films in this franchise range from being like good to like really freaking good to me. I think this is a franchise that knows exactly what it is at the end of the day, and they are not afraid to give their fans exactly what they want, and I think that's proven entirely with Final Destination Bloodlines. They did such a good job with that movie, and I am so glad that Tony Todd was able to appear in it before his unfortunate passing. I think that he did such a fantastic job in the role, and again, that scene with him, it brought me to freaking tears in the movie theater, man. I think that it was just so expertly done, and the kills in this franchise, too, on top of it, mind you. It has some of the most imaginative and, like, memorable death scenes of the genre. This franchise single-handedly made it to where logging trucks will never, ever, ever, ever be looked at the same way, ever again. And honestly, if Final Destination 4 hadn't been such a shit show, I probably would have put this in the top tier, but that movie unfortunately made it miss the slot just by a hair, honestly, because I wish it was so bad that it was entertaining, but that movie just pissed me off, honestly. And then next up on the list, and I feel like this one is perhaps more controversial, and maybe even controversial for the reasons I'll give for why it's not in the top slot, so we'll wait and see on that. But it's going to be the Evil Dead franchise. And in total, there are 5 movies. And then we have the Ash vs. Evil Dead TV series. And I do enjoy the Evil Dead franchise. And there's only 2 entries that I'm not really a big fan of. And this is where I feel like people are going to grab their pitchforks, because I love the original Evil Dead. I love the Evil Dead, like, reboot, remake, whatever the fuck you want to call it. And then I liked Evil Dead Rise. I even like Ash versus the Evil Dead. I think that show's super entertaining, and I watched all 3 seasons of it. I'm not a big fan of Evil Dead 2, though, and I'm especially not a fan of Army of Darkness. I don't know why the comedy worked for me in Ash vs. Evil Dead, but I just wasn't really a fan of it in those 2 films. I enjoy Evil Dead 2 more than Army of Darkness. Army of Darkness kind of lost me a little bit, and it felt less horror to me. I don't know. I know that's like me sounding gatekeepy, and I'm not saying it's not horror. It just isn't what I look for in a horror movie. So those 2 movies kind of lost me. But overall, I love the Evil Dead franchise. I do love Ash as a character. And, like, young Bruce Campbell, like, whew, daddy back in the day, man. Holy shit.
Groovy.
But in the original film, I think that is, like, your perfect, like, 80s, like, horror flick. And I do think it's cool that they did push into a comedy direction. It didn't land for me personally, but I do love when this franchise does, like, commit to being, like, in the horror and, like, scary vibes. It's a huge part of the reason I love the original Evil Dead, and I love the Evil Dead reboot, remake, again, whatever the fuck it is. I even liked Evil Dead Rise. I thought a lot of the practical effects in that were really good and, like, really freaky and gross looking. The TV series, again, I think is really entertaining. I love the new characters that they introduced into the show that were able to fight alongside with Ash. I thought that was really fun. Overall, I have a lot of fun with this franchise. Whenever I hear they're going to come out with a sequel to it, I can kind of assume that it's going to be a pretty decent movie, because they haven't, like, released a bad movie in this franchise per se. It's just the 2 movies that are on it that I don't like, and it just weren't made for me, and I can acknowledge that. Like, they're not bad movies, it's just they weren't made for me at the end of the day, and, like, they're not my cup of tea, and, like, that's all there is to it. But overall, like, I have a lot of faith in this franchise, and I'm really excited to see what they do with it in the future, since they do have plans to make other sequels in the near future, I believe, actually. But coming up next is going to be the It franchise, and the whole reason, and again, hot take here, but the whole reason this franchise ranks at number 2 for me is because I love the It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 entries. They came out when I was in high school, and I went and saw both of those in theaters, and I loved the socks off those movies when they came out. Because I've watched them so much, Pennywise is a little overdone for me now, but I cannot ignore the fact of how, like, much I loved these when they came out. I mean, fuck, I think I saw the first It movie in theaters, like, 3 or 4 different times, just because I was so freaking into it. Where I have a drawback with this franchise, though, is I'm not really the biggest fan of the original miniseries that they did. It just wasn't my cup of tea. I don't think it's aged the best personally. I understand why other people like it. It's just, again, not my type of thing. And then as for the TV series Welcome to Derry, I did watch 3 or 4 episodes of it, but I ended up falling off. But I do think a big part of that, like I said, is because I overwatched these movies when I was younger, and it kind of killed it a little bit for me. I think I just watched them like too close back to back to back, and the fact that like It Mania was a thing and like you saw Pennywise literally fucking everywhere, it just kind of killed the character off for me a little bit, and I wasn't so into it anymore. But I just couldn't put it lower on the list because, again, like, this had like a huge mark for me and like my memories of the genre and stuff for when I was a teenager. So like, of course, like, it has to be in a decent slot at the end of the day. Coming up next though, and this is one that makes me really sad because I would have put it in the first slot, where I would have felt like all the entries in it were next to perfect, and even the bad ones I could still have fun with. But alas, there's one entry that I cannot freaking stand whatsoever, and it is the Saw franchise. And what I love so much about the Saw movies is the fact that in the Saw franchise, it very much feels less like a series of movies and more like a season of television, especially those first 7 movies. I've said it before on the channel, but I feel like those first 7 movies in the franchise, it just feels like a next episode of the series. And then when you get to like the final chapter, not a good movie, but I was entertained by it. But when you get to Saw, the final chapter, you have it ending on like essentially it feels like the cliffhanger for the end of season 1. I love that. I love how that whole setup feels. I've never seen a horror franchise that's ever been able to replicate that feeling before, and it's something that I very much appreciate from the Saw franchise. And then I wasn't even that upset about Jigsaw. Like, Jigsaw wasn't that good, but it kind of felt like the pilot episode of the second season of it for this imaginary TV show setup I have for Saw. So Jigsaw doesn't bother me. It's rather inoffensive. Not the best Saw movie, but it's rather inoffensive to me. It could have been gorier. And then, of course, you have Saw 10, which is hands down the best sequel that this franchise has ever had. Need I say more? They did such a good job of bringing Tobin Bell back to this franchise. I loved seeing the return of Amanda. I just loved that movie. But of course, the reason why this franchise can't reach the top of the list is because Spiral exists, and I really, really hate fucking Spiral, man. And I was so excited for that movie when I heard it was coming out and I saw the trailers for it. It was the very first Saw movie I even saw in theaters, and I was super stoked for it, man. And it just ended up being a stupid dumpster fire, and it did not know what made a Saw movie good at the end of the day. So thank you, Spiral, for making it to where I can't say Saw is one of the best franchises, for me anyways, of all time on this list. Like, seriously, go fuck yourself, Spiral. Now, coming up next on the list is going to be the Purge franchise, which consists of 5 movies and 2 seasons of a TV show. And overall, I don't have a problem really with any of the Purge movies. There's some that I like more than others. There is one in particular where I was entertained by it. Overall, though, the Purge franchise is just something that I feel like a part of the reason it ranks so high for me, because these were movies that were coming out when I was younger. So for like the people who grew up with like the Freddys and the Michaels and like the Jasons of the world and shit, this is the stuff that I grew up with and that I remember the most, and being so excited for each entry as it was coming out. And I've seen like the grand majority of this franchise in theaters, actually, which I can't really say about most franchises on this list, honestly. But I had a lot of fun with the Purge movies. I even enjoyed the TV show. I think the TV show in its first season, though good, I think it tried too hard to be like the movies. I didn't think it came into its own until the second season, where it like did more world building and like showed you what happened in between purges, which is unfortunate because I feel like it was too little too late at that point, because the show ended up getting canceled after the second season, and I think it probably lost people because of the first season being just an over drawn out purge night over the course of like 10 episodes. Even with as much fun as I had with it, it was a little bit of a drawn out night. But overall, I do enjoy the Purge franchise. I find pretty much all the sequels to be very watchable. There isn't anything in here that is so egregiously bad that I can't watch it. The only one that even teeters on that is the Forever Purge, and I still have some entertainment value with it at the end of the day. So that's why it's this far on the list. I don't feel the need to put it higher. I don't think it ever hits being amazing, but I do enjoy the Purge movies and the show, really all of them for the most part. What's coming up next is the X trilogy, and this is perhaps the newest franchise on this list, and I am going to kick myself in the ass for this, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, but I was not the biggest fan of X. There were aspects of it that I did like. I loved Jenna Ortega in the film. I thought Brittany Snow was freaking hilarious in the entire movie, but I just wasn't that into it. Honestly, most of it kind of bored me a little bit. So after I saw that one in theaters, I was just like, okay, I'll wait for Pearl to come out on like streaming or whatever, and then I will watch it. And I fucking hate myself for that because I love Pearl so much. It is one of my all-time favorite horror movies. I think Mia Goth just eats up that role. And then of course Maxine, because by the time this franchise brought me back in, I went and saw that in theaters too, and I know people have their problems with it, and I don't think it's a perfect movie, but I was really entertained, and I actually really enjoyed Maxine. I wish I would have enjoyed X as much as those last two entries, because I've tried rewatching it since, and I still kind of feel the same way about it, but both Pearl and Maxine are really good movies, and I would die on that hill, because I really do enjoy both of them. And again, Mia Goth is fantastic. Like, we need her in more horror, and I just would love to see more of her, because I just feel like every time she jumps on the screen, I just feel like she's able to, like, eat that screen, and she's able to serve every single time. Like, there's nothing else to it. But coming up next on the list is going to be the Friday the 13th franchise, and I know there are some big stinkers in this franchise, and it's probably blasphemy even that I put this a tier above Halloween. Do I care? No, not really, because Michael is not my guy, but Jason's my boy. I love Jason. They have remade the same movie so many times for Jason, and for the most part, most of them I kind of find entertaining. I think the first one is like a very chill, low-budget horror like flick. Even though Jason isn't in it, I still have my fun with it, and like seeing the stupid Pamela Voorhees twist I think is fun. I think both 2 and 4 are really good movies. I fucking love 2 and 4 for similar reasons. I think 4 is like the best sequel this franchise has ever gotten, but 2 is still fun. 3, well, we're gonna ignore 3. I'm not a big fan of 3D. Like, boring a little bit to me. I think 5 through 6 are really good. Really, there's only a couple entries in this franchise that I full-on dislike, and that would be Jason Takes Manhattan, and then I think it's, The New Blood, and I wish I liked The New Blood, man, but I just don't. I wish they would have done something better with it. There's a good movie hidden in there somewhere. They just weren't able to hit it, and it's definitely because the studio cut out so much shit from it. But overall, out of the 12 movies in this franchise, most of them I find some entertainment value in, and I have a lot of fun with. Again, I don't think this is like a perfect franchise by any means, but there is so many moments in it that I do find extremely entertaining for the schlocky slasher vibes. And there really isn't much else I can say about it. I just love Jason. I love the summer camp aesthetic in an 80s horror flick. It's just all super appealing to me, and that's why it ranks so high. It's just, there is some stinkers in this franchise, so of course it's not going to hit the top for me. Coming up next, and I'm probably not going to delve into too much detail about this because I am still actually covering this franchise on my channel currently, so if you want to hear extra thoughts about it, then check it out. But it's going to be the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and that's going to be the last one on this list, which is fitting because this is the Dream Child section of the list after all, which is probably less fitting that I name this section the Dream Child, because the Dream Child is definitely not the dream child of that franchise. We'll just say that right now. But overall, I really do enjoy the Nightmare movies. The vast majority of them I have some fun with. Again, I don't want to get into too many thoughts about it though, because I do have plans to cover the rest of this franchise very soon on the channel. Hell, by the time this video comes out, I may have already finished my coverage on it. But overall, I enjoy Freddy. I think Freddy is such a great character and like a staple of 80s horror. I'm not the biggest fan when he gets pushed into his more like comedy, like comedic era when he was all over MTV or whatever. But I do enjoy Freddy in the earlier entries, and then I even have some fun with some of the later entries in the franchise. And a lot of my enjoyment of this franchise comes from Robert Englund himself. He does such a good job of portraying the character. And I don't know, I just really love Freddy Krueger. And I'm not going to say anything else. Like, if you want to hear my full thoughts, just watch my videos, man. But this is going to lead us up to our very last section of the list, and I only have 3 movies here, so I was trying to be extremely conservative with what I put up here. And this section is The Perfection, and the first of the 3 that made it up into this section is going to be the Terrifier franchise. And this could very easily change with later sequels we have yet to see, but as it stands currently, there are currently 4 different Terrifier movies. Yes, only 3 are canon, but All Hallows Eve still exists, and I've seen it, so we're going to talk about it. All of the Terrifier movies so far I have enjoyed, and I haven't really had any problems with. Even All Hallows Eve, I usually don't like those anthology-style horror movies. They're not my thing, but most of the stories in All Hallows Eve were also attached to the wraparound story with Art the Clown, so I had a lot of fun with it. I actually enjoyed it, and I think it's lesser talked about. I know a lot of people dislike it, but I really enjoy it. I think they did a good job on it, and I don't care what the haters say. The first Terrifier, super low budget, but it's dumb fun. That's all I can say to it, and that's really all this entire franchise is, honestly, is a lot of dumb fun. You see Art the Clown being an absolute menace in this movie, and just slaughtering people in the most imaginative and disgusting and gross ways. And if you're not a fan of gore, you're not going to like these movies, but overall, all of them have been good for me, and I have enjoyed every entry in this franchise, and I hope that they continue the momentum with the franchise and continue dishing out good sequels, because so far this franchise is firing at all cylinders for me. But coming up next on the list is going to be the Scream franchise, and I feel like most people wouldn't have felt like this was controversial to put up here before Scream 7, but I'm not most people. For better or worse, I don't really have a problem with almost any entry in this franchise. I even think that eventually, and I could be wrong, but I do think eventually Scream 7 is going to be looked at kind of similarly to Scream 3 at some point, where, like, it's not a good movie, but, like, it's still entertaining, and it's fun to see our characters come back. Like, that's how I personally feel about Scream 7, you guys. Overall, though, Scream is one of my all-time favorite franchises. It's actually in my top 3 for favorite franchises. And really, the only sequel that I really had problems with was Scream 6, and that's just because I just kind of felt bored by it. I just felt like it was been there, done that a little bit. Some fun sequences, but overall, I don't hate it, though, so if I were to rewatch the franchise, it wouldn't be something that I would skip, and I would definitely watch it to see how, like, the story unfolds over the course of the sequels. But overall, I just think Scream is so freaking good. I love how interconnected all the movies are. And again, that's something that I just love in a horror franchise, when it sticks with continuity and, like, you have returning characters throughout the sequels. It just feels more like a cohesive world versus, like, just slapdash bullshit to, like, make another sequel. I'm looking at you, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Ghostface 2 is such an iconic character, and then our main trio of characters that essentially is in most of these movies between Dewey, Gale, and Sydney, they're all amazing for their own reasons, and my god, they need to stop doing Gale dirty, and we need to get a Gale-centric movie at some point, because if they kill Gale before she gets her movie, I will riot. I will straight up riot. I am just throwing that out there, man. And this is Future Justice backtracking like a motherfucker, but somehow I almost forgot that the Scream TV series is a thing, and I could shoot myself for that because I loved that TV show when I was a teenager. It was easily my Pretty Little Liars of that generation. You know, before Pretty Little Liars came out with Pretty Little Liars Original Sin, we had Scream, the TV show, and that show was a total trip, and I was obsessed with it. So yeah, another reason for why Scream is so high on this list for me. But I just love these movies, and there isn't much else I can say about it. Like, I could gush about Scream for hours and hours, but I am not going to do that today. So we're going to jump to the last thing that edged out this list, and it is going to be the Child's Play franchise. And this, again, is one of my top 3, which is Scream, Saw, and Child's Play. And there is not a single entry, essentially, in the Child's Play franchise that full-on upsets me, kind of like with Scream. The only thing that I can think of for it that I really don't care about and is forgettable to me, which I even kind of forgot about when I made this list, is the remake, but whatever, it doesn't exist to me. It wasn't awful, just forgettable. Like, that's that simple. But the 7 movies, for the most part, I enjoy all of them for different reasons. The only one that I kind of like to is Child's Play 3, and a lot of the feelings I have about Scream 6 can be said about Child's Play 3, where I kind of felt like it was spinning the wheels of what the first 2 movies did, but it wasn't offensive to me, and it didn't bother me, and it isn't a movie that I skip when I rewatch the franchise. It's just not one that I would watch as a standalone ever. But overall, I love the Chucky movies. I even loved the TV series, and I loved that we had so many connections to all the movies, and the fact that we got like more of a conclusion to like the Glenda story, even though they were very heavily ignored in Curse and Cult. I thought it was cool to bring them back, because now it doesn't feel like a weird hole, and it feels less like this franchise is embarrassed of itself. And I just want to see what they do in the future now, which I know they have a sequel planned to be coming out in theaters. It just got released that Don Mancini is actually returning to direct it. And I know a lot of people have problems with Don, but I don't. I enjoy the fact that this is his baby, and that he looks at this franchise as such, and all the things that he's done with it. Like, yeah, there's been some missteps here and there, but I feel like overall, I don't even mind the missteps that he's made for the most part. And in fact, I think that some of the missteps have become kind of iconic in of themselves. Like, I'm looking at you, Seed of Chucky. I kind of fuck with you a little bit, man. But overall, the Chucky franchise is a franchise that I'll never be upset to hear that we're getting another sequel to. If I heard we were getting another remake, that'd be a different story. But I just love how unashamedly Chucky is Chucky, and just how interconnected this world is, how often we see characters return, and just how often that you think they forgot about a storyline, but then they bring it back up in a later entry or even in the TV show. I just think Chucky is a really great franchise, and I think it is commendable, the fact that the Chucky franchise has been going on since the 80s, and we're still in the same continuity today. You can't say that about most franchises at the end of the day. So Chucky, I think, has earned its spot on this section of the list, and I don't care what anybody else says. But anyways, this may have perhaps become my longest video of all time. We will see after I hit the editing room floor on this video. But you guys should let me know what some of your favorite franchises are of all time. You should let me know if you disagreed with some of my takes in this video. Or, hey, maybe I introduced you to a couple of deep cuts that you never heard of. I would love to hear that. But if you guys enjoyed the video, I would love if you hit that like button. And if you want more content in the future, just like this, then I would love if you hit that subscribe button. I cover everything and anything horror on this channel. But with that all out of the way, this has been Justice, and I really hope to catch you guys on the next one. Take care.